we actually happen to have John McNellis, who is the founder of McNellis Partners and specializes in developing supermarket-anchored shopping centers, as well as working with the public to teach them how to take advantage of what this lovely country has to offer in the real estate market. John's also an author, by the way. So we have John on the show with us. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Emilio. Delighted to be on your show.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for being here with us. So John, now you're the author of Making It in Real Estate and starting as a developer. And I know you wanted to share with our listeners what you've learned about succeeding in the real estate business. And you kind of learned the hard way. You went deal by deal until you kind of got it. Is there anything you can tell our listeners in regards to that and what they should do, what they shouldn't do? Any advice you'd like to give?
Well, actually, my wife says one thing that isn't in the book is that you really need to have tenacity in real estate.
Yes.
You need to stick with it. It's not a get-rich-quick business. It's not a get-rich overnight business. Frankly, it's a kind of a get-rich-slow business. So I think my best advice is to be careful, start small, and stick with it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And you know what? I'd like to actually, I've done a lot of research on you, and I see that you have a quote here. And I love this, and I like how upfront you are with people. My desire, quote unquote, my desire is to leave you with the same admiration, caution, and healthy respect for real estate development that a zookeeper has for his lions. Perfectly said.
That's right.
Love it.
One of my daughters happens to be a zookeeper, and so I'm very familiar with, and the analogies seem apt. Real estate development is tricky. I think I also point out that almost everybody, and in fact I would say everybody, sooner or later, if you're in the real estate business, loses money. And so what you have to do, Emilio, is not put all your chips on any given deal. You've got to be careful. You've got to be cautious. You've got to spread your risk out. Okay. If, for example, let's say you want to you buy one house every year, fix it up, and sell it. If you do that, you buy one for $200,000, you put $50,000 into it. I'm using simple numbers, and you sell it for $300,000, and you've made $50,000 profit. If you do that every year for 10 years, you've made $500,000. If on the 11th time something goes wrong, the house burns down before you can get insurance on it, or the market totally collapses. If on the 11th time you lose, you're going to lose. You're not going to lose your shirt. Let's say you lose your down payment, but you're not going to go broke. If on the other hand, you've gone from a $200,000 house to a $500,000 house to a $2 million and so on. So in the 11th year, you're doing a $10 million deal, and you lose on that one, you're broke.
Makes sense. And that kind of goes with the. You also, when I was reading up on you, you talk about pretty much play small ball, okay? And
right.
And I like that, and I really do, and I think that's a really humble way of looking at it. But it's not that you're only doing one or two things. I think somebody like you're doing a lot of things, but you do what you know, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a great question. What I think the best way to succeed in real estate is to pick one specialty, and it doesn't really matter which, whether it's residential, hotel, office, industrial, and you stick with that specialty, and you also stick with your own backyard. And for us, everything is within about a 2-hour drive. That way you can really learn the area, and you can be competitive with much larger players if you're in your own backyard and if you're highly specialized.
Mm-hmm. So, the whole state of Rhode Island is literally a 45-minute drive from one point to another. John, everywhere is in our backyard. And I love the fact that here in Rhode Island, when I take a listing out in like Westerly, which is like 30 minutes from Warwick, where our home base is, okay, people are like, wow, you're going to drive that far. And the mentality here, John, is you need to pack a lunch to go 30 minutes. And you're talking about 2 hours. And so I love
Well, in that case, just stick with Rhode Island. It's a great state.
Yep.
There's a lot of opportunity there. So and make that your border of operation.
John, let's talk about some issues that are affecting the the Boston and Providence real estate markets, and some of these issues is policy and politics, correct? Well, that would be one of them, right? One of the big ones.
Of course.
Okay, so I mean, and you do business in a lot of states, not just California, right?
Actually, I follow my own advice, and so all of our deals are within a 2-hour drive in Northern California keeps you within California. So everything we do, Emilio, is within the greater San Francisco Bay Area. But I'm aware because of national trends, and San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, they all have very similar challenges to development.
See, I was just testing you, John. No, I actually I forgot that you just said you stay within that area, but it makes a ton of sense. But I guess I reading your information and whatnot that you have out there, it looks like you've got a really good idea of what's happening around the country, and seeing the amount of red tape that developers have to cut through in places, especially like Rhode Island right now. There's a long waiting period for them to be able to get approvals on development, so that can be tough. And I know that right now we have people working to change that, which is really great, but there's also some other things as well. Housing affordability, rent control, you said how the internet is affecting brick and mortar retail centers. That is perfectly put. We're seeing more vacancies than ever with retail. I mean, how is retail going to bounce back from that?
That's a great question. I think that right now we're in this really awkward middle stage. What's interesting, Emilio, is that the internet retail companies, from Amazon all the way down to the newest little internet retail company, they don't make any money. The joke in the business is the only two companies who make money with e-commerce or internet retail are FedEx and UPS. The smart retailers, old school, old line bricks and mortar retailers, they are like Walmart is a great example. They are doing everything they can to catch up with the internet. And the internet retailers are opening bricks and mortar. They're going to meet in the middle. So I think what happens, that all settles out. So rather than you and I, we're going to go buy a dress shirt. In the old days, you'd say, I'm a large or an extra large or whatever. There'd be 1,000 shirts there to choose from. The new model, you'll still want to go try on that shirt before you buy it on the internet, but they'll only have 4 or 5 shirts there. And you'll say, okay, I like it in white, and now I want that shirt in 6 other colors, and it's click, click, click. Wow. It'll be delivered to you.
Yeah.
So what that means are stores are going to be much smaller. They're not going to have that inventory there. And so there is going to be this vast displacement. It's going on right now. Only the best shopping centers, and every town has that one premier A location. Those will do fine. The B and C locations, and particularly the B and C locations in the B and C towns, they need to be repurposed because they are not going to survive as retail gradually evolves into kind of half retail, half internet. And that is where, back to housing, that most of those old centers are in pretty good locations. They're just the time has passed them by, but they're always fairly densely located. They're almost always great residential locations. And so they're calling it the demauling, take an old mall and tear it down. You take a 1 million square foot mall, Emilio, and you cut it down to maybe 100,000 feet of retail, and then you put in higher density residential, apartment houses, townhouses, condos. I'm seeing that across the country. And it's not, I don't know about Rhode Island. California, that's tricky because California relies on retail sales tax. The cities do not like to see retail being replaced by residential. Is that the case in Rhode Island?
Not so much. We have a high residential tax rate, actually one of the highest in the country. And we do have a lot of small business, a lot of small, retail here as well as big. But we're noticing a lot of doors closing. And I think that it actually makes me pretty optimistic for the future in hearing what you're saying about kind of the mesh between internet and stores. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And never mind the fact that we have a huge shortage of housing here, John. And I can totally see developers catching on here on the East Coast with what's happening on the West Coast and across the rest of the country, and making these monster malls that we have and shopping plazas and whatnot, part retail and part housing. So we are seeing a little bit of that happen here, but we're pretty late to catch up with what's happening on the left coast. So.
Well, so I would urge all your listeners to go out and buy a defunct shopping center and get it rezoned. But of course, the zoning is a challenge, but get it rezoned for residential.